Thank you for joining me for today's Beast Watch News Update. News from the Internet's most comprehensive Bible prophecy news website, BeastWatchNews.com. I'm Kimberly Rogers Brown. A new harbinger came to Temple Mount this week. Some want to know, are these messages from God? And if so, what is he trying to tell us? The United States southern border is now about to be overwhelmed by that migrant caravan. Who is among those migrants? Ordinary Central Americans seeking U.S. citizenship? Drug cartel members? Or possibly worse, ISIS? Before I get to those, let's take a look at what is happening in Israel. Could this week's Gaza missile barrage have changed Israel's political leadership forever? Since last Sunday, Israeli and Gaza's militants have engaged in the worst fighting since 2014. Hamas launched over 400 missiles at Israel, making this the heaviest fighting between Israel and Gaza since their war in 2014. A botched intelligence mission by undercover commandos left 7 Palestinian fighters dead last Sunday night. An Israeli lieutenant colonel was also killed in the border crossing clash where the Israelis were trying to enter Gaza. Something went awry at that border crossing, causing gunshots to begin. The details vary with the teller. On Monday, in response to this incident, Hamas and other armed factions mounted an intense rocket and mortar barrage across much of southern Israel. Israel's official explanation was that the mission's goal was surveillance, not an assassination, as Hamas claims. Such missions aim at installing surveillance equipment at the border for security purposes. They are well planned and considered a low-risk operation. However, Hamas tells a different story. They said the Israeli team traveled by car 2 miles inside Gaza, much further inside Gaza territory than perhaps needed for the planned mission, in a civilian car. A group of Hamas fighters had stopped the vehicle carrying the Israelis to check their identities. It was then that the Israeli unit shot Noor Barakah, a local Hamas leader, and another militant. Iran's media reported that Israel had performed the covert operation to assassinate Noor Barakah and that it was a drive-by shooting. So Israel, Hamas, and Iran tell different stories. Why? Well, the most correct account is likely from Israel. This type of operation is performed by Israel and Hamas frequently. Often the news reports that Israelis have caught Hamas infiltrating inside its borders, but rarely have there been news reports of Israelis infiltrating inside Gaza. Hamas's operations inside Israel are for the purpose of killing Israelis. Israelis' operations inside Gaza historically have been for other purposes such as surveillance or warning the general population of coming IDF bombings. This confrontation comes just a week after Israel gave in to Hamas's extortion for $15 million per month and an offer to build a desalination plant specifically for Gaza to assist with the Strip's water problems. In the aftermath came the resignation of Avigdor Lieberman, Israeli defense minister, over the Egyptian brokered ceasefire that ended the violence. The Israel Beitenu party said that the truce in Gaza cannot be interpreted in any other way than a surrender to terror, and that it will severely harm Israel's security in the long term. Lieberman, who also objected to Israel's allowing Qatar to deliver $15 million in aid to Gaza last week, called for new elections and said all members of his party will quit the coalition government headed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of the Likud party, according to a report by Israeli newspaper Haaretz. Lieberman has demanded a far stronger Israeli response to the most intense round of rocket fire against Israel since that 50-day war in 2014. That war killed more than 2,100 Palestinians, mostly civilians, and 72 Israelis, according to the UN. Sderot residents protested the ceasefire on Tuesday and Wednesday, burning tires and blocking roads near them. The possibility that Israel will see more people hurt and killed inside its borders continues to rise. Consider these statistics. In 2014, 67 IDF soldiers were killed. Hamas had 2,310 killed and 10,626 wounded. The difference in casualty numbers is staggering. We will have to wait and see whether the time is now or later that Yahweh will unleash the greater number of casualties for the Israeli side. While Palestinians are doubting that the peace deal will hold, calls for Europe to step in are coming forth. Many believe the EU can make better progress dealing with the problems in Gaza. Gaza will be uninhabitable by 2020 if current conditions continue, citing the damage caused by Israel's 11-year economic blockade and fighting between Israel and Gaza. 95% of Gazan tap water is undrinkable, and its beaches are choked with untreated sewage. Electricity is available for just 4 hours a day. Unemployment is at 44%. The depth of human suffering and despair has been apparent since the Great March of Return began in March, where Gazans risk death on a daily basis to protest at the fence with Israel. People are looking for the EU to define its own strategy in the region and step out of the U.S.'s shadow. The U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and cuts in aid have undermined America's role as a mediator, according to this report. Prospects for the U.S. peace plan look bleak now. The EU should look beyond efforts to tackle Gaza's immediate humanitarian crisis with aid and focus on reconciliation between the two major Palestinian political parties and deploy its economic leverage to foster peace. If I'm right that the EU, under the wing of the U.S. president, will turn out to be the army that invades Israel, NATO, this call for EU intervention could be playing right into Yahweh's hands. A better plan for the Palestinian people would be to call for Israel to annex the Gaza Strip and oust Hamas and the other Islamic terror organizations. Even as second-class citizens, their plight would be much better under Israel. The EU already has leverage over Israel. The bloc is Israel's largest trading partner, buying 34% of its exports and providing almost 40% of its imports. This is why the European-based BDS movement is so dangerous. The EU and Israel's trading agreement provides tariff-free trade in most goods, but is conditioned upon respect for human rights and democratic principles. If the EU deems the Gaza situation to be Israel's fault, they could put Jerusalem under siege as in times past. The EU has criticized Israel's settlements in the West Bank and called for restraint by the Israeli armed forces, but it has so far shied away from attaching conditions to the bilateral relationship. Canceling current modes of operation would antagonize Israel and require consensus among the member states that would be hard to achieve. But the EU could introduce demands in exchange for any future upgrade to the relationship with Israel. For example, on its 2021 to 27 research and innovation program. This approach has worked in the past. In 2013, the EU excluded Israeli projects undertaken in the occupied Palestinian territories from its Horizon 2020 research program. The outcry from the research community and the public drove Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to sign up to the program on the EU's terms. Even if the latest reports of ceasefire hold, the sheer desperation in Gaza created by the blockade makes further violence inevitable. The EU has the power to use a combination of relief, reconciliation, and economic leverage to help foster a lasting peace. Now the EU must use it, according to this report. I think the best route for the EU is to steer clear of Yahweh's hand. He will protect his land and people. And now there's this article, European Union stealing Israeli land. This article says the European Union is investing hundreds of millions of dollars to steal land from Israel. This is according to IsraelUnwired.com. Why? Well, in order to create a Palestinian state, the article says. The answer provided does not get to the root of the problem, which is, as I keep saying, the two sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians, are the modern and end times houses of Judah and Israel who are still fighting over territory after 2,900 years. The article goes on to say, they say that the land belongs to the Palestinians. Since when? There never was an entity called Palestine. There never was a people called Palestinians. Now, this rhetoric is coming out of Israel, not from the PA. Usually, the PA claims the Jews were never in the land. Let's set the record straight. There was a land called Palestine, and those people in Palestine were called Palestinians. Syria Palestina was a Roman province between 135 AD and about 390. But there was mention of Palestine even in the 5th century BC in ancient Greece when Herodotus wrote of a district of Syria called Palestine, located between Phoenicia and Egypt, in his book called The Histories. In July 1922, the League of Nations entrusted Great Britain with the mandate for Palestine. Recognizing the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine, Great Britain was called upon to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine, Eretz Israel, land of Israel. The Palestinians claim Yahweh's land for themselves only and say the Jews never existed there. I have a video on Beast Watch News this week that shows that some Palestinians know they are Hebrews, and they openly admit it, but they call themselves Jews. I'm sure that some of them are from the house of Judah, but as I've shown in previous broadcasts, these people are mostly house of Israel from the northern tribes. But both sides lie when they make these claims, when they say the land is just for them. This article goes on saying this illegal land grab must stop. Now, I have said that Israel's settlement building also must stop now, whereas before they declared their Jubilee, and now it's beginning to look a lot like what the Jews did in Jeremiah 34, it was rightful for them to acquire and settle all the land, but now it is not. The Jubilee requires the restoration of all the tribes, a situation they outlawed with the nation-state bill. However, Yahweh is, I believe, already beginning to judge Israel for not keeping the Jubilee yet again, as they did not do it in Jeremiah 34. This message is hard to hear. It's a warning. It's a warning that Jeremiah gave. It's a warning that Yeshua gave. And now the Jews are hearing it again. They must restore the land to its original state. So, the Europeans are helping the Palestinians in their evil pursuit of Yahweh's land. Calling it a hostile takeover, Jewish press says this: Regavim's latest report exposes the Palestinian Authority's systematic but silent plan powered by massive European Union financial support. Strategically positioned agricultural land seizure projects covering tens of thousands of dunams of land in areas under full Israeli jurisdiction are creating irreversible facts on the ground. Large-scale planting, creation of irrigation systems, and an enormous network of illegal roads are carving up the open spaces in Judea and Samaria and drawing the borders of a de facto Palestinian state in Israel's heartland in flagrant violation of the law. Well, whose law? Jewish law. But which law is supposed to govern Yahweh's land? His law or the Jews? And here's a question for you. Why is the European Union so bent on helping the Palestinians? Why is the European Union on such an anti-Jewish track? Well, it's because of who the European people are. From some genome studies with links that you can find in Beastwatch News this week, Europe's population is largely out of the Middle East. Surprise? No. And not just Jews came out of the Middle East. Europe is comprised of people from the house of Israel, who still sees the house of Judah as its enemy. Many migrations from the Middle East to Europe have occurred over the time since the flood. One of these migrations was a large population of Hebrews from the house of Israel running from Assyria and Babylon. The next migration was Jews from the house of Judea, or house of Judah in Judea, and Ephraimites from the house of Israel from Galilee, running from Rome. You know, they both ran together from Rome. Waves of dispersions from the Middle East have happened over and over for thousands of years. In those waves of immigrants were Yahweh's people. These are likely the people in control of Europe today. More than 50% of European population is from the Middle East. Did you know that? Scripture tells us about the blessings of Jacob to his family, while prophetic scripture tells us that Yahweh intends to destroy the Gentiles. By the time of the end, Hebrew DNA must be predominant all over the earth because Abraham was given a promise before Jacob ever existed. That promise was that all the families of the earth would be blessed in Abraham. In modern terms, this means all the families of the earth would have a connection to Abraham's DNA. The Bible tells us about Gog's attack on Israel. It even tells us that Gog is a Hebrew. The history of Gog's migration from Israel to Turkey, then to Scandinavia, and on to Northern Europe verifies the scripture. At the end of days, the Hebrew family of Gog will rise, unbeknown to most people and unrecognized for who he is, to be powerful enough to raise an allied army of nations to attack Israel. Genome analysis shows mass migration of early farmers from the Fertile Crescent. These farmers became the foundation of Northern Europe's Celtic population. So the European American stock wants to impose a two-state solution on the Palestinians and Jews. Neither of these brothers are happy with this. Each wants the entire kingdom for himself. A two-state solution, though, was the situation 2,900 years ago when this Hebrew civil war started. A two-state solution is today the one favored by the majority. Yahweh tells us what will happen at the end by showing us what happened in the beginning. Thus, a two-state solution is where Israel is likely headed. In fact, Trump has revealed a peace plan to unify the West Bank and the Gaza Strip this week. Jason Greenblatt made that announcement. Greenblatt said Gaza and the West Bank have been separated for 10 years, not only physically but politically, between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. It's absurd to deny that reality, but our peace plan intends to bring them together. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. He says, make no mistake, we're in this to help all Palestinians in both the West Bank and Gaza. Here we come with we're so concerned about the Palestinians again. Once our plan is released, all parties should read it and judge it by its merits. The PLO should be a positive force to change people's lives for the better and not try to sway people before they have seen our plan. Greenblatt went on to say, well, good luck with that, sir. U.S. officials say the peace plan will not require Israeli security concessions, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will have to demonstrate leadership and make difficult decisions. Stay tuned. I'll be right back after these messages. Thank you for listening to the Jerusalem Report on Beast Watch News. Full news coverage with a Hebraic perspective of the headlines fulfilling Bible prophecy. Remember to financially and prayerfully support Beast Watch News for keeping you up to date. Send your donation to Beast Watch News today. It takes money to operate this ministry, and your help is much appreciated. Also, sources say President Trump expects both Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to positively respond to the American plan and start the negotiation process. Again, good luck with that, sir. I can't imagine that the Trump administration can deal with peace between the Palestinians without also dealing with Israel's new nation-state bill. That bill could unite the Palestinians against Israel in the short term, but will certainly be a stumbling block for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. In an article by AsianAge.com comes this statement. It is true that the bill, speaking of Israel's nation-state bill, could get the support of 62 members of the Knesset, but the fact cannot be denied that the new law is tailor-made for Jewish supremacy, leaving Arabs as a second-class citizens. This decision has sparked outrage not only from the Arab community in Israel, but has also provoked concerns from the international community. The European Union, the Muslim world, and all Arab nations collectively have opposed this bill as it leads to discrimination against Arabs and other minorities. Condemning this development, the Turkish government termed it as disregarding to the Palestinian citizens in Israel as it gives right to self-determination only to the Jewish people. Thus, ignoring the 21% of Arabs in the country, the new law is also against the spirit of democratic Israel, which promises to treat all its citizens with equal political and social rights. Equality and minority rights were the integral parts of Israel's Declaration of Independence in 1948, stating that Israel will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. But Mr. Netanyahu's new law will only protect the rights of Jews, leaving out all other communities. It is unfortunate that the democratically enforced law is being used to abuse the largest minority group. And now moving on, it looks like Israel may be headed for early elections. A poll taken by Israel's Channel 2 this week found a 74% disapproval rating of Netanyahu's handling of the situation in the south, just after Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire after almost 500 rockets were fired into Israeli territory from the coastal enclave, which was the largest barrage ever. Israel's Channel 2 election poll showed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party would hold only 29 seats in Knesset if elections were held now. This is a slip from the 31 seats the Likud party won in the last election. Recently, Netanyahu said Likud would seek 40 seats in the next election, but the majority of Israelis see Netanyahu's government as weak because of the recent Gaza war, in which some Israelis were killed and others wounded under Hamas's missile barrage. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman's resignation has strained Netanyahu's coalition because Lieberman took his Yisrael Beitenu party with him out of the coalition, leaving the government with a narrow 61 to 59 seat majority in the Knesset. Naftali Bennett of Beit Yehudi, current education minister, has issued an ultimatum for the post of defense minister. He is threatening to pull his party and its 8 seats from the coalition. Now, Netanyahu has plans of taking over that folder himself. The Jewish Home Party, though, held a faction meeting during which its MKs voted unanimously in favor of leaving the coalition if Netanyahu does not make Bennett defense minister. Naftali Bennett's Beit Yehudi gained 11 seats in the poll, while Yesh Atid gained 18 seats. So in this poll, it looks like Israel could make a swift and hard right turn, and those are the people that are going to make the two-state solution happen. Opposition leaders on Wednesday called for immediate elections, and the Meretz Party announced its plan to propose a bill to dissolve the Knesset next week. Zionist Union Chairman Avi Gabe and opposition leader MK Zippy Livni said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government was collapsing under its own cynicism, and that the country could no longer be left in the hands of the coalition. Of course, Hamas celebrated Lieberman's resignation and hailed it as a victory. Hamas's spokesman Sami Abu Zuri said on Wednesday that Lieberman's resignation signaled a recognition of defeat and failure to confront the Palestinian resistance, adding that Gaza's steadfastness sent a political shockwave through Israel. I have to say that I think I agree with that statement. It appears to the world now, not just Israelis, that their sense of safety is dissipating. Now we're going to move on to the invasion of the U.S. southern border. While Israel is suffering from its defeat to Hamas, her sister nation, the United States, is preparing for an invasion of her southern border by the immigrants marching north. Do you see any similarities between the southern border of Israel and the southern border of the United States? Yahweh is starting to clean up his 2 houses. A 22-bus caravan is expected to continue north on the Mexican Federal Highway 15, temporarily stopping or passing through Hermosillo and north through Santa Ana, then west into Mexican Federal Highway 2, past Caborca, San Luis Rio, Colorado, Mexicali, Tecate, and then to Tijuana. This segment of the migrant caravan is part of the 7,000 to 10,000 Central Americans who crossed into Mexico approximately a month ago, according to this report from Breitbart. Roughly 6,531 migrants crossed the state of Querétaro over the weekend, according to that local government. The figure is greater than the count made by authorities when the group spent several days in Mexico City, which suggests the possibility that other migrants joined the caravan. The group eventually stopped in Guadalajara after passing through Guanajuato. Authorities provided federal police escorts since they are traveling through some of the most dangerous territories of Mexico. Guanajuato experienced a 400% increase in murders since 2015 as organized crime gangs fight over lucrative drug trafficking routes and illegal fuel pipeline taps. According to news.com.au, 800 migrants have already arrived, with most of them handled by border security already. The rest of the migrant caravan is following behind them at an accelerated pace. Large groupings of migrants gathered on the beach in the northern city of Tijuana at the border fence that separates Mexico from California, climbing on top of it, even jumping down to the other side as U.S. Border Patrol agents looked on, before quickly scrambling back to the Mexican side. The report further says that 5,000 could arrive by Friday. CBS News reports that 1,100 Marines from the Marine Corps base Camp Pendleton in California were deployed. Border security, according to CBS San Diego affiliate KFMB. They were primarily tasked with installing concertina wire and a pre-positioning of jersey barriers, barricades, and fencing. Now here's some information you need to know coming out of Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch reports that ISIS operatives are making their way to the U.S. with the migrant caravan. Guatemala's president announced this week that nearly 100 ISIS terrorists have been apprehended in the impoverished Central American nation. Guatemala has long been known as a major smuggling corridor for foreigners from African and Asian countries making their way into the U.S. Last year, Guatemala's largest paper, Prensa Libre, published an in-depth piece on the inner workings of an international human smuggling network that moves migrants from Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh to the U.S. Individuals are sent to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, then flown to Brazil before heading to Colombia. Once in South America, the migrants are transported to Panama before moving on to Costa Rica, then a central point on Guatemala. One Spanish news report refers to Guatemala as a human smuggling paradise because it's so easy to get fake passports. A few years ago, the head of Guatemala's passport division got arrested for selling fake passports to a group of Colombians, according to a government announcement. All this makes ISIS terrorists operating in Guatemala incredibly alarming. President Jimmy Morales confirmed it during a recent security conference attended by Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, as well as the presidents of Honduras and El Salvador and other Latin American dignitaries. Morales said that his administration has captured close to 100 persons completely involved with terrorists, with ISIS, and we have not only detained them within our territory, but they have been deported to their country of origin. Several of the terrorists were Syrians caught with fake documents, according to Guatemala's head of intelligence. At the same event, President Morales also revealed that Guatemalan authorities captured more than 1,000 gangbangers, including members of the MS-13. Many more probably make it into the U.S. via the Mexican border, and a lot of them get released inside the country because Border Patrol agents in Texas have been ordered to release illegal immigrants caught entering through Mexico because detention facilities have no bed space. Earlier this year, Judicial Watch exposed a secret program started by Obama and continued by Trump that quietly relocates illegal immigrants to different parts of the country on commercial flights. Years earlier, Judicial Watch uncovered a similar DHS initiative that transported illegal immigrants from the Mexico border to Phoenix and released them without proper processing. The government classified them as other than Mexican, or OTM, and transferred them 116 miles north from Tucson to a Phoenix bus station where they went their separate way. The OTMs were from Honduras, Colombia, El Salvador, and Guatemala, and a security company contracted by the U.S. government drove the OTMs from the Border Patrol's Tucson sector, where they were in custody, to Phoenix. Some could have been ISIS operatives. CBS News reported in August 2018, the FBI believes Islamic extremists used a compound in the New Mexico desert to train kids to attack American schools. Believe it or not, a judge's decision to grant bail means 4 of the 5 suspects could soon be released on bond. Now, experts say they fear this is just one of many terrorist training camps operating on U.S. soil. There are so many people in the United States that are a part of the jihad ideology who are doing either fundraising here in the U.S., training in the U.S., to conduct attacks here in the homeland and abroad, said former CIA operative Joseph Assad. Assad adds that extremists exploit the religious freedom laws of the United States to create sleeper cells that are operating off the grid until they're ready to strike. The CIA and FBI discovered a camp in New Mexico in which was also found 11 emaciated children and the remains of a 3-year-old boy. An FBI agent testified they were told the 3-year-old died as part of a ritual to expel demons. He died from having vital medication withheld. Now, the other children believed the boy would resurrect as Jesus, and when he did return, he would tell them which targets in America to attack. Now, listen, CBN is a reputable news outlet, Christian Broadcast News. I bet you didn't know these groups practice human sacrifice, did you? No, they didn't lay the boy on an altar and slit his throat. They slowly killed him in a way that doesn't look like a child sacrifice. Make no mistake. These people and their brothers in the New World Order have the same ideology and the same goal. They only make it look like they are enemies to each other. Ryan Morrow, a national security analyst with the Clarion Project, says it's no surprise these training camps exist in the United States, but it is rare to get the evidence for a raid. One example, Morrow notes, is the Jamaat al-Fruqo group, which claims to have 22 training camps across the country. They haven't been cracked down on because they are not going out trying to kill people right now, he explained. They've done so in the past, but right now they are not. Why? Because when you build up an infrastructure that massive and you're making millions of dollars and sending it over to Pakistan, why would you carry out a violent plot and risk losing everything? Morrow says most people think of radical Islam as just the act of terrorism and getting virgins in paradise. But radical jihadist groups have beliefs about Islamic end times prophecy which teaches a war will take place between a Messiah figure, their Messiah figure, and the Antichrist. Most of them believe that will be Israel or the West or someone from there, Morrow explained. When the leader wages this war, and he will win because Jesus will come to his side. The Muslim Jesus will show up, will break a cross, and prohibit Christianity. Here's the axiom. Islamists say they will go after the Sabbath keepers and then the Sunday keepers. Friends, if you're in the Hebrew Roots movement, you might get caught in either one of these. My experience is that Muslims cannot wrap their minds around the fact that we are neither Jewish or Christian. To them, we could be either one. Experts say the ultimate goal of radical Islam is not just to inflict terror by attacking our nation, but to inspire homegrown terrorism from within, committed by Americans against fellow Americans. So, the day is coming when Americans will have to face the same Edomites that Israel is facing. You see, Yahweh's people don't suffer different fates because they're in two different houses. Even the Messiah suffers their fate with them, and they suffer the fate of the Messiah. Yahweh, His people, and His land cannot be separated. It only looks that way sometimes. And by the way, in case you need to be reminded of Islam's war on the West, the European Court of Human Rights passed a verdict last Thursday that insulting Islam's prophet Muhammad would be a punishable offense and will not be protected as free speech. Now let's look at a harbinger, possibly a harbinger of no mercy. Temple Mount has been the scene of several strange phenomena recently. Large sections of the ancient stones suddenly falling away, an inexplicable mist that surrounded the dome of the rock, which is partly the ancient area of the women's court, a snake crawling out from between the rocks, and now a sinkhole has appeared adjacent to the Gate of Mercy. Is this new harbinger a precursor to an earthquake prophesied by the prophet Haggai that happens as a warning that the Great Tribulation is coming? Is there a spiritual message about Yahweh's mercy sinking, as it were? Or perhaps the answer to both of these questions is yes. It may be that this dramatic geologic development has already begun, this earthquake prophesied by Haggai. About 1 month ago, Jews going up to the Temple Mount began to notice a change in the sidewalk adjacent to the area of the stairs going down to Sha'ar HaRakamim, the Gate of Mercy, or Golden Gate as it is known in Christian literature. The sidewalk had sunk visibly and was cracking as if the ground was opening up underneath the paving stones. The location is highly significant. The gate is described in a prophecy of Ezekiel as the gate through which the Shekinah, the divine presence, used to appear and will appear again when the Anointed One, the Messiah, comes to enter the third temple. Ezekiel 44:2-3 says, "Then said the Lord to me, This gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because the Lord, Yahweh, the God of Israel, has entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut. It is for the prince. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before Yahweh. He shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same." Just a side note to those Jews, mostly all of them, who don't believe that Yahweh is the Messiah and the Messiah is Yahweh, and who don't understand how it is that the Prince, Messiah, will eat before Yahweh. This prophecy clearly identifies the coming Prince, Messiah, as Yahweh. Just had to get that in. The gate was sealed by the Muslims in 810 CE, opened by the Crusaders in 1102 CE, and sealed up again by Suleiman in 1541 CE. It has been conjectured by scholars that the motivation for sealing the gate was a Muslim attempt to prevent the arrival of the Messiah. Rabbi Yosef Berger, rabbi of King David's tomb on Mount Zion and a member of the nascent Sanhedrin, believes he may have had a hand in the recent underground activities leading to the sinking sidewalk. Just before Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, the Sanhedrin stood outside the Sha'ar HaRakamim and blew shofars, he said. We wanted to do something, anything, to help bring Geula, or redemption, closer. The connection between the Temple Mount and the Jewish people is a strong connection, like between a husband and a wife. Perhaps the mountain hurt us, he said. The earth is certainly moving under the Temple Mount, Elishama Sandman, Temple Mount spokesman, said. It is impossible to say whether this is from geological changes or illegal construction. In the same way, it is impossible to rule out divine causes. The Waqf won't let any scientists or archaeologists investigate, and certainly no rabbis. But it is clear that something is happening there. My vote is on the divine cause. That's it for this Beastwatch News Update. This is Kimberly Rogers Brown signing off. Click over to beastwatchnews.com for full comprehensive coverage of all the headlines fulfilling end of days Bible prophecy.